Dad. The word was misspelled in wobbly crayon letters at the bottom of a child's drawing, but it hit William Hartley harder than any board meeting gone wrong. He stood in the hospital hallway, his expensive suit wrinkled, staring at stick figures that told a story. He'd been too afraid to see a tall man in a suit, a small boy with tears, and between them empty space. "Mr. Hartley, your son is stable," the doctor said, but William barely heard him. All he could see was Lucas through the hospital room window, his 6-year-old body dwarfed by medical equipment, a bandage covering the gash on his forehead. Mrs. Chen's panicked call still echoed in his mind. "Lucas, climb up high to get Mama's picture. He fall blood everywhere." The housekeeper had found his son unconscious on the kitchen floor. Sarah's photograph clutched in his small hand, the one William had hidden on the highest shelf 2 years ago, unable to throw it away, but unable to bear seeing it. William Hartley, CEO of Hartley Industries, a man whose company was in the middle of a $40 million acquisition, had been running from his own son. For 2 years since cancer took Sarah, he'd buried himself in work, leaving his capable COO Marcus to handle daily operations, while William obsessed over the Morrison deal that would secure his company's future. His phone buzzed with the 17th missed call from Marcus. "Where are you?" Morrison's board moved the meeting up. "They're threatening to walk." 300 employees' families with mortgages and children, all depending on decisions that seemed impossibly distant now. "Mr. William." Mrs. Chen had sobbed to him 3 weeks ago. "I cannot watch this anymore. That little boy, he talks to her picture every day. He says, 'Mama, why Daddy work all the time? Does he still love me?' I'm 70 years old. I raised 4 children. This is not how children should live." She'd given her notice that day, and William had been too consumed with merger documents to understand what she was really telling him. The drawing trembled in William's hands. This wasn't defiance. This was desperation. Lucas hadn't been trying to break rules. He'd been trying to reach the only piece of his mother his father had left visible. While William thought he was protecting his son from painful memories, he'd been starving him of love itself. Mrs. Chen's final words echoed. "You think hiding her away protects him, but he needs to remember she loved him. You work so hard to give him everything, but the only thing that boy wants is his daddy." The question that would change everything escaped in a broken whisper. "What kind of father have I become?" But that night in the hospital would be nothing compared to what William was about to discover when he finally opened his eyes to the life his son had been living without him, and the stranger who would walk into their broken world with the power to heal them both, or destroy what little remained of their fragile family. 3 weeks earlier, the Hartley mansion stood like a monument to achievement and emptiness. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a view that cost more than most people's homes. But inside, silence reigned like a living thing. William's footsteps echoed through marble hallways as he returned from another 18-hour day at Hartley Industries. His phone still buzzing with urgent messages about the Morrison acquisition that could make or break his company. "Mr. Hartley." The voice belonged to Mrs. Chen, their longtime housekeeper, who'd been with the family since before Lucas was born. Her usually steady hands shook as she approached him. "The new lady is here for the interview. But sir, before you meet her, I need to tell you something about Lucas today." William barely looked up from his phone where stock prices and merger documents demanded his attention. "What about Lucas? Is he sick?" "No, sir, but—" Mrs. Chen's voice broke slightly. "He had another episode at school. The teacher called. He hid under his desk during story time because they were reading about Mother's Day crafts. When they found him, he was crying and saying, 'Daddy doesn't want me to remember Mama.'" The words hit William like a physical blow, but his phone chose that moment to ring his business partner Marcus, probably calling about the Morrison deal for the 15th time that day. We'll discuss this later, Mrs. Chen. Send in the interview candidate. Make it quick. I have calls to make. Mrs. Chen's face fell with disappointment William chose not to see. Yes, sir. But Mr. William, that little boy needs you more than any business deal ever will. Jasmine Rhodes stepped into the study with quiet dignity. Her dark skin glowed against a simple navy dress, and her eyes held something William hadn't seen in his house for 2 years. Warmth mixed with profound understanding. William began his tone businesslike. Your references from the agency are adequate. The position requires— Where is Lucas? Jasmine interrupted gently. William's fingers stilled on his phone. Excuse me, your son. It's almost 7 o'clock. Most 6-year-olds would be having dinner, maybe watching cartoons. Where is he? That's not your concern. The job is maintaining the house, preparing meals, basic childcare when I'm traveling. Nothing more. Jasmine's eyes didn't waver. With respect, Mr. Hartley, if Lucas is my responsibility, he is very much my concern. Something in her voice made William look up for the first time. In her steady gaze, he saw something that made him uncomfortable recognition. As if she knew exactly what kind of man he'd become. Lucas stays in his room mostly, William said finally. He has everything he needs. Educational toys, books, a tablet for learning games. But what does he want? The question hung in the air like smoke. William's jaw tightened. Ms. Rhodes, I didn't bring you here for parenting advice. Can you do the job or not? I can do the job, Jasmine said quietly. But I won't pretend not to see what I see. That night, Jasmine found Lucas exactly where William had implied, alone in his room, surrounded by expensive toys he wasn't playing with. The boy sat by his window, pressing his small hand against the glass as he watched other children play in the neighbor's yard. Hi, sweetheart, Jasmine said from the doorway. I'm Jasmine. Lucas turned his eyes wide and cautious. Dark circles shadowed his face, too pronounced for a child his age. Are you going to leave like the others? The question pierced straight through her chest. What others, baby? Mrs. Patterson left because I cried too much. Mrs. Williams left because I asked too many questions about Mommy. Mrs. Chen said Daddy makes everyone go away. Jasmine knelt beside him, her voice gentle as rainfall. I'm not going anywhere, Lucas. Not unless you want me to. Daddy doesn't like it when I talk about Mommy. And what was your mommy like? Lucas's face transformed as if someone had lit a candle behind his eyes. She smelled like vanilla cookies. And she sang to me every night this song about stars watching over little boys. She said even when she went to heaven, the stars would remember her song. Tears gathered in Jasmine's eyes, but she kept her voice steady. She sounds like she loved you very much. Daddy loved her too, but now he pretends she never existed. He put away all her pictures and her music and even her coffee cup with the chip in it. He said it would make the sadness go away, but it just made him go away too. That night, Jasmine stood in the kitchen, unpacking groceries she'd bought with her own money. Real food fruits that weren't pre-packaged vegetables, that weren't frozen ingredients for meals made with hands and heart instead of purchased and reheated. William appeared in the doorway at nearly 11 o'clock. His shirt wrinkled and his tie hanging loose around his neck. His eyes were red-rimmed from staring at computer screens, and his hair disheveled from running his hands through it, a nervous habit Sarah used to tease him about. He looked startled to see lights on and activity in his sterile kitchen, as if he'd forgotten that life could exist in this space. Honeycomb, what are you doing? His voice carried the edge of a man who'd spent the last 4 hours in crisis management mode, trying to salvage a deal that represented not just money, but the financial security of every employee who depended on him. She's making breakfast for tomorrow. Jasmine set her hands steady as she measured flour. Lucas told me he likes pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, and I noticed he's been losing weight. The clothes in his dresser are all too big for him now. William's jaw tightened. He'd been so buried in work, in the endless demands of keeping his company afloat while grieving his wife, that he hadn't noticed his son was literally disappearing before his eyes. Lucas needs everything, Mr. Hartley. Jasmine's voice was soft, but unflinching. He needs breakfast that tastes like love instead of something heated in a microwave. He needs someone to notice when he's scared, when he's happy, when he's trying to tell you something important, but you're too busy with your phone to hear him. He needs to know his mother's memory is safe with you, not hidden from him like a shameful secret. William's phone buzzed with another email from Marcus. Morrison's attorneys are demanding a meeting first thing tomorrow. We're losing this deal, William. Where's your head? You don't know anything about my family or what we've been through, William snapped, but his anger felt hollow even to himself. I work 18 hours a day to provide for my son. This house, his school, his future, none of that comes free. Some of us don't have the luxury of focusing on feelings when there are real responsibilities to handle. Jasmine set down her mixing bowl and looked at him with eyes that held infinite sadness and infinite compassion. I know what it looks like when grief becomes a wall instead of a bridge. I know what it sounds like when a child cries himself to sleep because he's afraid he's forgetting his mother's voice. And I know what it feels like to love someone so much that you think protecting them from pain is more important than sharing their healing. You have no right. I know because I've been there too, Mr. Hartley. I know because I lost my son 2 years ago, and I spent 8 months believing that if I didn't talk about him, it would hurt less. Instead, it nearly killed me. And it almost destroyed my ability to help the children who needed me most. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. William's hands shook as he gripped the doorframe. Behind him, his home office glowed with the blue light of computer screens showing stock prices, email notifications, and video conference requests from international clients who didn't care that it was nearly midnight in his time zone. His name was David. Jasmine continued, her voice barely above a whisper, but steady as stone. He was 8 years old, and he wanted to be a pediatric nurse like his mama when he grew up. He said he wanted to help other kids feel better the way I helped him feel better when he was scared. William found himself sinking into the kitchen chair across from her, his phone forgotten for the first time in months. Kutseti. When David got sick, I threw myself into being the perfect medical mother. I researched every treatment, questioned every doctor, organized his care like a military campaign. I thought if I could just control enough variables, fight hard enough, be strong enough, I could save him. But cancer doesn't care how hard you fight or how much you love someone. She paused, her hands still moving methodically as she worked. After he died, I went back to work because I thought helping other sick children would fill the hole he left behind. But I couldn't connect with them anymore. I was so afraid of feeling David's loss again that I stopped feeling everything, their pain, their family's hope, their small victories. I became exactly the kind of nurse I would have hated if David had been my patient. How did you get through it? You, a patient's grandmother, this tiny woman who'd buried 3 children of her own, looked me in the eye one day and said, "Grief that's locked away doesn't honor the dead. It just buries the living." She was right. David wouldn't want me to stop caring for sick children because I'd lost him. He'd want his love to keep living in the world through my hands, my heart, my presence with other families walking the same dark road. William's phone buzzed again, but for the first time in 2 years, he ignored it. I can't talk about Sarah without falling apart. And Lucas needs me to be strong. Satikadium. Lucas doesn't need you to be strong, Mr. Hartley. He needs you to be present. He needs you to see him, really see him, and let him see you too, not perfect, not unbreakable, but real. Children don't need perfect parents. They need authentic ones. She turned to face him, fully flower on her apron and compassion in her eyes. "Your son is drowning, William. He's 6 years old, and he's carrying the weight of protecting your feelings while trying to process his own grief. He's convinced himself that he reminds you too much of Sarah, so he's trying to become invisible to spare you pain. Meanwhile, you're working yourself to death, trying to provide for a future that won't matter if he doesn't survive the present." The words hit him like physical blows, each one landing with the force of truth he'd been running from for 2 years. Every night he sits by his window and watches other children play with their fathers. Every morning he comes downstairs, hoping you'll notice him, really notice him, and every evening he goes to bed disappointed. He stopped talking about his mother because he thinks her memory hurts you. He stopped singing her songs, stopped asking questions about heaven, stopped being a normal grieving child because he's too busy trying to be easy enough that you won't send him away too. "I would never. You already have, William. You sent him away emotionally 2 years ago, and he's been trying to find his way back to you ever since." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. William's hands shook as he gripped the doorframe, his phone still buzzing insistently with calls that seemed increasingly meaningless. His name was David. Jasmine continued her voice, barely above a whisper but steady as stone. "He was 8 years old. Brain cancer, glioblastoma. The doctors gave us 6 months, but he fought for 13. 13 months of hospitals and treatments and hope and heartbreak, and through it all, he kept asking me to sing him the song about the brave little star who wasn't afraid of the dark." She paused, her composure wavering for just a moment before she found her strength again. "After he died, I couldn't even hum that song. I packed away every toy, every picture, every reminder of him because I thought if I could just make the memories stop coming, the pain would stop too. I went back to work at the children's hospital 3 weeks after his funeral because I thought helping other sick children would fill the hole he left behind." William found himself leaning forward despite himself caught in the gravity of her story. "But it didn't work. None of it worked. The other nurses started calling me the Ice Queen because I couldn't connect with my patients anymore. I was so afraid of feeling David's loss that I stopped feeling everything, their pain, their family's fear, their small victories. I was just going through the motions of living, and it was killing everyone around me, especially myself." "How did you—" William's voice cracked. "How did you get through it?" Jasmine's smile was sad, but genuine. "A little girl named Maria, 7 years old, leukemia. She'd been in and out of the hospital for months, and her grandmother was the only family she had left. One day, Maria asked me why I never smiled anymore, and her grandmother, this tiny, wise woman, who'd raised 8 children and buried 3, looked me straight in the eye and said, 'Major grief that's kept locked away doesn't honor the dead. It just buries the living.'" William's phone had stopped buzzing. The Morrison deal, the stock prices, the urgent emails, none of it seemed to matter in the face of this woman's quiet wisdom. That's when I realized that David wouldn't want me to stop singing his song. He'd want me to sing it for other children who needed to remember they were brave. He'd want his love to keep living in the world, not die with him. She looked directly at William, and her words landed like gentle arrows. "Your wife Sarah, isn't it? She wouldn't want Lucas to grow up thinking his mother was a secret shame to be hidden away. She'd want her love to keep living through you, through him, through the stories you tell and the memories you share." William sank into his chair, suddenly exhausted. I can't talk about her without falling apart. And Lucas needs me to be strong. Tukia, Lucas doesn't need you to be strong, Mr. Hartley. He needs you to be present. There's a difference." 4 weeks into Jasmine's employment, the Morrison deal had reached a critical juncture, forcing William to work from home, while lawyers flew in from 3 different countries to finalize contracts that could determine his company's survival. For the first time in years, crisis had brought him to the same space as his son. During daylight hours, an accident of circumstance that was about to change everything. The change in Lucas was so gradual that William almost missed it, caught up, as he was in the mounting pressure of negotiations that had reached a make-or-break point. But even through his exhaustion and stress, he couldn't ignore the sounds drifting from the kitchen laughter conversation. The clink of real silverware against plates that held food made from scratch instead of delivered from restaurants. Jasmine had transformed their cold dining room into something that felt dangerously close to home. Fresh flowers appeared on the table, nothing expensive, just daisies from the grocery store, but they brought life to a space that had been a mausoleum. Most remarkably, Lucas had begun emerging from his room drawn by warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "Tell me about school today, sweetheart," Jasmine said as she set down a plate of chicken cut into star shapes, a whimsical touch that made Lucas's face light up. "Jeremy's mom brought cookies for the whole class," Lucas said, poking at his food thoughtfully. "She said she made them from her grandma's special recipe. They tasted like hugs." William's phone buzzed with urgent messages from Marcus about the Morrison board's latest demands. But something in his son's voice made him pause. "I bet your mommy made good cookies too," Jasmine said gently. Lucas's eyes brightened, then clouded with uncertainty as he glanced toward his father's office. "I'm not supposed to talk about mommy's cooking. It makes Daddy sad." From his office doorway, William felt that familiar tightness in his chest. But this time, it was mixed with something else, curiosity about his own son's memories. "What kind of cookies did she make?" Jasmine asked. Chocolate chip, and she let me help even when I made messes. She said the secret ingredient was..." Lucas scrunched his nose, trying to remember. "Something about vanilla, but I can't remember exactly." William's phone rang Marcus, calling about the contract deadline. But for the first time in months, he let it go to voicemail. Something about watching his son struggle to remember his mother's recipes, while he had Sarah's handwritten recipe cards hidden away in a kitchen drawer, felt suddenly unbearably wrong. "I know what the secret ingredient was," William heard himself saying as he stepped into the kitchen. Both Lucas and Jasmine turned surprise evident on both faces. "Daddy!" Lucas's whole face transformed. "Do you really remember?" William's throat felt tight, but he managed. "Your mother always said vanilla twice, once for flavor, once for luck. And she'd taste the dough at least 3 times to make sure it was perfect, which meant we had to make extra because she ate half of it raw." "Chatin, can we make them?" Lucas asked, bouncing slightly in his chair. "The way Mommy used to..." The question hung in the air. William's phone was buzzing again, probably Marcus, with urgent updates about legal clauses that needed immediate attention. But looking at his son's hopeful face, William made a choice that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. Let me tell Marcus I'll call him back." For the next hour they worked together, and William felt pieces of himself he'd thought were lost forever slowly returning. He found Sarah's recipe card tucked behind the spice rack, where she'd always kept it, her handwriting still clear and familiar. As they measured ingredients, Lucas peppered him with questions about his mother. Did Mommy really dance while she cooked onyx tarkalita? She did. Usually off-key singing, too. She'd use the wooden spoon as a microphone and perform concerts for whoever was brave enough to watch. Did I dance with her? You'd stand on a chair and help her stir. She called you her sous chef. For the first time in 2 years, talking about Sarah felt like celebrating her instead of mourning her. Lucas absorbed every detail like he was storing precious treasures, and William realized how much of his son's history he'd been withholding out of his own fear. But their fragile peace shattered that evening, when the past collided with the present in a way that nearly destroyed everything they'd begun to rebuild. Lucas had developed a low-grade fever, nothing serious, just the kind of bug that kindergartners share like trading cards. But seeing his son pale and listless triggered something primal in William, a fear that went beyond rational thought, straight into the territory of panic that lived in every parent who'd watched illness steal someone they loved. As Jasmine tucked Lucas into bed and took his temperature, she began humming softly a melody that made William freeze in the hallway. "Sing the star song," Lucas requested sleepily. "You know the one I taught you." William's blood turned to ice. He stepped into the room as Jasmine began to sing. "Little star, brave and bright, watching through the darkest night." "Stop." His voice cut through the gentle melody like a blade. "Stop singing that song." Jasmine's voice died mid-note confusion and hurt flashing across her face. Lucas's eyes opened fever-bright and confused. "But Daddy, I taught it to her. It's Mommy's song. That song belonged to your mother and me." William said, his voice harsh with pain and jealousy he didn't fully understand. "No one else has the right to sing it." The words hung in the air like poison. In that moment, watching another woman sing his wife's lullaby to his sick child, William felt something dark and possessive rise up in his chest. It felt like watching someone else live in his life, love his family, take his place in a story that was supposed to belong to him and Sarah alone. "It's Mr. Hartley," Jasmine said quietly, standing slowly from Lucas's bedside. "Lucas was humming that melody the first week I was here. When I asked him about it, he said it was his mother's special song. I've only been singing what he taught me. I don't care how you learned it." William snapped, but even as he said it, he knew he was being unreasonable. "Some things are private. Some things belong to families, not to employees." Lucas began to cry, not from physical discomfort, but from the sudden emotional violence that had shattered their peaceful evening. "You think because you lost a child, you understand our grief." The words poured out of William like poison. "You think that qualifies you to step into my wife's role to sing her songs and comfort her son like you have any right to the intimate pieces of our life." Jasmine's face went very still, but her voice remained steady. "No, Mr. Hartley. I think it gives me the experience to recognize when a child is drowning in silence and needs someone to throw him a rope. I think it helps me understand the difference between honoring someone's memory and burying it out of fear. We don't need your rope." "Sure, Lucas needs something," Jasmine said, gesturing to the sobbing child on the bed. "Look at him, William. Really look at him." William looked down at his son, who was crying into his pillow, overwhelmed by his father's sudden anger and the return of the emotional chaos he'd thought was finally ending. "But you can tell. This is exactly why I don't let people get close," William said, but his voice had lost its edge and taken on the hollow quality of a man who had just realized he was destroying everything he'd started to rebuild. "This is why I put the pictures away and stopped playing her music. Because the moment you start healing, the moment you let someone in, they remind you of what you've lost, and it tears everything open again." But even as he said it, William knew it wasn't true. Jasmine hadn't torn anything open, she'd simply been present for the healing that was already happening, and his fear had turned her care into a threat. Shutsen and the little star shined so bright, because he knew his mama was watching from heaven, singing the song that would help him find his way home. William recognized the melody. It was Sarah's lullaby, the one she'd sung every night, the one he'd forbidden in his house, because it hurt too much to hear. The door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, he could see Jasmine sitting on Lucas's bed, stroking his hair as she sang. Lucas's eyes were closed, peaceful for the first time in 2 years. But it was what he saw next that shattered something inside his chest. On Lucas's nightstand, partially hidden under a pillowcase, was Sarah's coffee mug, the one with the small chip that William had thrown away months ago. Somehow Lucas had rescued it from the garbage, keeping this piece of his mother safe in his secret treasures. Beside it lay a small wooden box William had never seen before. His heart pounding, he pushed the door open wider. "What is that?" he whispered. Jasmine and Lucas both turned. Lucas's eyes filled with tears, as if he'd been caught stealing. It's my memory box," Lucas whispered. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I know you don't like mommy things, but I couldn't forget her." "I couldn't." William stepped into the room on unsteady legs. "What's inside?" With trembling hands, Lucas opened the box. Inside, a ticket stub from the last movie Sarah had taken him to see, a hospital bracelet she'd worn, a pressed flower from her funeral bouquet, a CD with her handwriting, "Songs for my sweet boy." "I take one thing out every night and tell Jasmine a story about mommy," Lucas said, tears streaming down his face. Like how she made funny voices when she read stories, or how she danced in the kitchen when she made pancakes, or how she said I was her greatest adventure. William sank into the chair beside the bed, his hands shaking. "Lucas, I know you miss her too, Daddy. I see you crying sometimes in your office when you think I'm asleep. But why can't we miss her together? Why does missing mommy make you go away?" The question broke something inside William that had been cracked for 2 years. He looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not just Sarah's eyes, but his own loneliness reflected back at him. "Because," William whispered, his voice breaking, "if I let myself miss her with you, I was afraid I'd fall apart and never be able to take care of you." "But Daddy," Lucas said, crawling into his father's lap for the first time in 2 years, "I don't need you to take care of me. I need you to love me." William buried his face in his son's hair, and for the first time since Sarah died, he let himself cry in front of another person. Jasmine's hand touched his shoulder, offering comfort without judgment. She loved you both so much," she whispered. "She wouldn't want you to honor her memory by forgetting how to live." 3 weeks later, the Morrison deal had finally closed, not with the triumphant success William had imagined, but as a smaller partnership that required him to delegate significant control to Marcus and his management team. For the first time in his career, William had been forced to admit he couldn't handle everything alone. The irony wasn't lost on him that losing control of his business had helped him regain control of his life. It was a Saturday morning when William did something that would have been unthinkable. A month earlier, he called Marcus to say he wouldn't be checking emails until Monday. "Are you feeling all right?" Marcus had joked. "Should I call a doctor? I'm feeling more all right than I have in 2 years," William had replied, and meant it. He found Lucas and Jasmine in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, an endeavor that had become a weekend tradition. But this morning felt different, charged with possibility and the comfortable rhythm of a family that was learning how to be together. "Look, Dad." Lucas held up a pancake that looked vaguely Stegosaurus-like if you squinted and used considerable imagination. "Jasmine says this one is museum quality." "Absolutely." William agreed solemnly, settling at the kitchen table with actual leisure for the first time in months. "We should call the paleontology department immediately." They spent the morning together, really together, not just occupying the same space while William's mind was elsewhere. They built a blanket fort in the living room, read stories in different voices, and when Lucas asked if they could look through some of Sarah's photo albums, William said yes without hesitation. But it was in the afternoon, while they were going through a box of Sarah's belongings that had been stored in the closet, that they found something unexpected, an envelope addressed to "My Boys" in Sarah's familiar handwriting, tucked inside her jewelry box. "What's that, Daddy?" Lucas asked, recognizing his mother's handwriting immediately. William's hands trembled as he held the envelope. Mrs. Chen must have saved it. He realized another piece of Sarah she'd preserved for the moment, when they would be ready to receive it. "It's a letter from Mommy," William said quietly. "Should we read it together?" Lucas nodded solemnly, settling close to his father on the bed where they'd spread out photographs and memories. Jasmine moved to give them privacy, but Lucas caught her hand. "Stay," he said simply. "You're part of our family now." William opened the letter with reverence and began to read. "My dearest William and Lucas, if you're reading this, it means Mrs. Chen decided you were finally ready. And it means I've gone ahead to wait for you in the place where all love goes when bodies can't hold it anymore. William, my darling, I know you're going to try to protect Lucas from the sadness of missing me. Your heart is so big and so gentle that you'll think love should only bring joy, never pain. But grief is just love with nowhere to go. Don't try to make it disappear. Help Lucas transform it into something beautiful. Lucas, my sweet boy, your daddy is going to be very sad for a while, and he might forget how to show you how much he loves you. But love doesn't disappear, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups just forget how to find it when they're scared. The best way to help someone who's lost find their way home is to keep being exactly who you are, curious and brave and full of light. I want you both to know that my happiest days were the ordinary ones. Saturday morning pancakes, bedtime stories, watching you two build sandcastles while I read on the beach. Fill your lives with ordinary magic, the kind that happens when people who love each other choose to be present for all the small moments. And someday, when you're ready, I hope you'll let someone else love you both. Not to replace me, no one could do that, but to add to the love I'm leaving behind. Love multiplies, my darlings. It never divides. Take care of each other. And remember that every time you choose joy over fear, every time you choose connection over isolation, I'm right there cheering you on. All my love, always and forever, Sarah. By the time William finished reading, all three of them were crying, not the bitter tears of loss, but the sweet sorrow of love that refused to be contained by death. "She knew," Lucas whispered, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "She knew we would find each other again." "Chachu, she knew because she knew us," William said, pulling his son close. "She knew that love like ours doesn't just disappear." They spent the rest of the afternoon going through Sarah's belongings together, not to pack them away or hide them, but to decide which pieces should stay visible in their daily lives. Lucas claimed his mother's favorite sweater to keep in his room. William chose her coffee mug to use every morning. Together they selected photos to frame and display throughout the house. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, a real family meal, William felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years: contentment. Not the desperate happiness of someone trying to outrun grief, but the deep satisfaction of someone who had learned to carry loss without being crushed by it. "So, William," Jasmine said, as she set the table with the good china they'd decided to use every day instead of saving for special occasions. "Can I ask you something? Anything? What changed your mind about letting me stay, about sharing memories of Sarah, about all of this?" William considered the question as he watched Lucas arrange flowers in a vase, a ritual that had become his contribution to their evening routine. "I realized that trying to protect him from love was just another way of abandoning him. And I realized that you weren't trying to replace Sarah, you were helping me remember how to honor her. And now. The word held infinite possibility. William looked around his kitchen at the family they were becoming, at the love that was growing in the spaces between them. "Now I want to build something beautiful," he said. "Not to replace what we lost, but to create something Sarah would be proud to see, a family that carries her love forward into the world." Lucas looked up from his flowers, his face serious with 6-year-old wisdom. "I think Mommy sent Jasmine to us," he announced. "Not to be my new mommy, but to help Daddy remember how to be my daddy again." That night, after Lucas had fallen asleep to the sound of Sarah's lullaby sung by all three voices, William stood in his son's doorway and marveled at the transformation. The memory box sat open on the nightstand, no longer hidden but proudly displayed. Sarah's coffee mug held fresh flowers. Photos of her smile decorated the walls, but the most remarkable change was in Lucas himself. The fearful, withdrawn child who had been tiptoeing through his own life had been replaced by a boy who laughed freely, asked questions without fear, and fell asleep peacefully, knowing he was seen and loved. William's phone sat silent on his dresser, deliberately turned off for the first time in years. Tomorrow there would be business to handle, decisions to make, a company to run. But he would do all of it from a place of wholeness rather than brokenness, present rather than absent, connected rather than isolated. The Morrison deal had taught him something more valuable than any contract. Success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. And the greatest success of all was learning to love without reservation, to be present without conditions, to build a life that honored both memory and hope. 8 weeks later, the changes in the Hartley household were visible to anyone who knew what to look for, but perhaps nowhere more evident than in William's office. Sarah's picture now sat prominently beside his computer, surrounded by Lucas's artwork, and a small vase that held fresh flowers changed weekly by small hands that took pride in making the space feel alive. But the most significant change was in how William approached his work itself. The near disaster with the Morrison deal had forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth: his company had grown, despite his micromanagement, not because of it. Marcus had proven more than capable of handling daily operations, and their management team had thrived when given actual authority instead of just responsibility. The board meeting that morning had been different from any in William's career. Instead of presenting himself as the indispensable leader who controlled every detail, he'd outlined a new structure that would allow him to focus on long-term strategy while trusting his team to execute the day-to-day operations. The Morrison partnership taught us something valuable, he'd told the board. Success isn't about one person holding all the cards. It's about building a team strong enough to succeed, whether I'm in every meeting or not. Some board members had been skeptical. Change always made investors nervous, but the numbers spoke for themselves. Employee satisfaction was up, productivity had increased, and William's strategic decisions were sharper when he wasn't drowning in operational details. "You seem different, William," board member Elizabeth Chen had observed after the meeting. "More focused, more present." "I've learned that being busy isn't the same as being effective," William had replied. "And I've learned that the most important job I have isn't CEO of this company, it's being Lucas's father." Now, at 4:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, William was doing something that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier, closing his laptop, turning off his phone, and heading home to pick up Lucas from school. Not because of a crisis or emergency, but because he'd promised his son they would work on a science project together. The park near Lucas's school was filled with the usual afternoon chaos of children being reunited with parents, but William spotted his son immediately. Lucas was animated, gesturing wildly as he told his teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, about something that had clearly made his day. Dad," Lucas called, racing over with a huge grin. "Guess what? I got picked to be the narrator for our class play about community helpers. Mrs. Rodriguez says I have a strong, clear voice, just like Mommy used to have when she read stories." The mention of Sarah no longer felt like a knife to the chest. Instead, it felt like a gift, his son carrying forward the best parts of his mother while building his own identity. "That's fantastic, buddy. I'm so proud of you." "And guess what else? Jeremy's dad is helping us build the set, and he asked if you wanted to help too. Can you please?" 6 months ago, William would have immediately started calculating whether he could fit volunteer work into his schedule, weighing it against quarterly reports and client meetings. Now he simply said, I'd love to. When do we start? They stopped at the grocery store on the way home, another small ritual that had become precious. Lucas rode in the cart, despite being technically too big for it, offering commentary on their choices and insisting they buy ingredients for Sarah's chocolate chip cookies, which had become their Saturday morning tradition. "Dad," Lucas said as they waited in the checkout line, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "And do you think Mommy would like Jasmine?" The question was asked with the careful consideration of a child who'd been thinking about something important. William crouched down to meet his son's eyes. "I think your mommy would love anyone who makes you laugh the way Jasmine does. And I think she'd be grateful that Jasmine helped us remember how to be a family again." "So you like Jasmine too, like really like her?" William smiled at his son's obvious matchmaking attempt. "I care about Jasmine very much. She's become an important part of our family." "Hi, good," Lucas said with satisfaction. "Because I think she likes us too, and Mrs. Chen always said that families don't have to look the same to be real families." At home, they found Jasmine in the kitchen preparing dinner, her hair pulled back and an apron tied around her waist. The sight still sometimes caught William off guard, not with the jealousy and fear it had once triggered, but with gratitude for the warmth that had returned to their house. "And how was school?" she asked Lucas, who immediately launched into a detailed account of his day that included playground politics, a substitute teacher who wore funny shoes, and the exciting news about the class play. William watched them interact with the contentment of someone who had learned to recognize happiness when it appeared. This wasn't the life he'd planned 2 years ago, but it was a good life, one built on honesty and presence rather than fear and avoidance. "Actually," William said as they sat down to dinner, "I have some news too. The board approved my new schedule proposal. Starting next month, I'll be working 4 days a week in the office, with Fridays reserved for strategy work from home." Lucas's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Does that mean you'll be here on Fridays? Like really here, not just working in your office?" "So it means I'll be available for field trips, school events, or just hanging out with my favorite 6-year-old. I'm almost 7, Lucas corrected with dignity, then broke into a grin. "But that's still awesome." That evening, they established another new tradition: family movie night. They'd pushed the coffee table aside and built a fort out of couch cushions and blankets, with Lucas acting as chief architect of their pillow construction. As they settled in to watch Lucas's choice, a movie about a robot who learns to feel emotions, William marveled at how different this felt from the silent, separate evenings they'd endured for 2 years. Lucas was cuddled between him and Jasmine, offering commentary on the plot and sharing popcorn with the generous spirit of a child who no longer hoarded affection out of fear it might disappear. "Dine," Lucas said during a quiet moment in the film. "Yeah, buddy. I'm really glad you came back." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything they'd survived and rebuilt. William pulled his son closer. "I'm glad I found my way back too." Later, after Lucas had fallen asleep in their pillow fort, and they'd carefully transferred him to his bedroom, William and Jasmine stood in the hallway talking in the quiet voices of people who understood the preciousness of a sleeping child. "How do you feel about all the changes?" Jasmine asked. "The work schedule, the new routines, all of it," William considered the question. 6 months ago, he would have measured success by quarterly profits and business growth. Now he measured it by Lucas's laughter, by bedtime stories that weren't rushed, by Saturday morning pancakes and science projects, and the simple pleasure of being present for the small moments that made up a life. "So I feel like I finally understand what Sarah meant when she said that the days are long, but the years are short," he said. "I don't want to miss any more of the years." In Lucas's room, they performed the bedtime ritual that had become sacred, checking that his water glass was full, adjusting his blankets just the way he liked them, and singing Sarah's lullaby together. The memory box sat open on his nightstand, no longer a secret collection of forbidden treasures, but a celebration of love that continued to live in the world. "Good night, sweetheart," Jasmine whispered, kissing Lucas's forehead. Good night, buddy, William added, smoothing his son's hair. Sweet dreams. Dad, Lucas's voice was sleepy but content. I love our family. I love our family too, son. As they turned off the lights and closed the door, William felt the deep satisfaction of someone who had learned to measure wealth not in dollars or achievements, but in moments of connection, in trust rebuilt in love that had been tested and proven stronger than fear. The Morrison deal had been finalized as a partnership rather than an acquisition smaller than William had originally envisioned, but ultimately more stable and more aligned with his company's values. His board had initially questioned the decision, but 6 months later, employee retention was at an all-time high, productivity had increased, and William had become the kind of leader people wanted to work for, rather than simply the kind they feared to disappoint. But more importantly, he'd become the kind of father Lucas deserved, present, engaged, and unafraid to love, fully, despite the risk of loss. He'd learned that grief and joy could coexist, that honoring Sarah's memory meant living fully rather than hiding from life, and that families could grow in ways he'd never imagined. Standing in the hallway of his home, listening to the comfortable sounds of a house where love lived, Jasmine washing dishes in the kitchen, Lucas breathing peacefully in his sleep, the soft hum of a life being lived with intention, William finally understood what true success looked like. It looked like this: a family that had been broken, learning how to be whole again, love that had been interrupted, learning how to continue, and a man who had been lost, learning how to find his way home. But their story of healing was just beginning. The real test would come in the months ahead, when they would plant seeds, both literal and metaphorical, that would grow into something beautiful enough to honor the past, while embracing a future none of them could have imagined. Sometimes the greatest gardens grow from the richest soil, and sometimes that soil is made from tears. 2 months later, the garden behind the Hartley mansion had been neglected for 2 years, but today it was alive with activity that spoke of new beginnings rooted in honored memory. William knelt in the dirt beside Lucas, their hands black with soil, as they planted a small oak tree, the same variety Sarah had loved, the one she'd planned to plant, before she got too sick to garden anymore. The transformation in their family hadn't happened overnight. Healing never does, but it had been steady, marked by small milestones that added up to something magnificent. Lucas's latest report card showed improvement not just in grades, but in social participation. His teacher had noted that he was more confident, more engaged, and clearly thriving in a supportive home environment. The school counselor had officially closed his file, satisfied that the interventions were no longer necessary. More importantly, Lucas had begun bringing friends home regularly. Their house, once a monument to grief, now echoed with the sounds of childhood video games and laughter, impromptu sleepovers, and the kind of chaos that comes when children feel safe enough to be themselves. Jasmine had embraced her role as the adult who remembered to buy extra snacks and who knew exactly how to negotiate disputes over board games. "Are you sure it'll grow, Dad?" Lucas asked, patting soil around the tiny sapling with the careful attention of a child who understood that some things needed special care to flourish. "Trees are pretty resilient," William replied, echoing words Sarah had once said to him during her illness, when she'd insisted on planting bulbs that would bloom the following spring, even though she knew she might not see them. Sometimes they just need the right conditions to flourish: good soil, enough water, and people who believe in their potential. Jasmine approached with a pitcher of lemonade and 3 cups. Her hair pulled back under a sun hat that had once belonged to Sarah, another small way they'd learned to honor memory while creating new traditions. She'd been part of their family routine for months now. Her presence so natural that it was hard to remember how they'd functioned without her steady warmth and practical wisdom. The community had begun to notice the changes too. Neighbors who had watched the Hartley house with concern for 2 years now waved from their yards and included them in block party invitations. Mrs. Patterson from down the street had stopped by the week before to thank William for letting Lucas help her elderly mother with grocery shopping, a kindness initiative that had been Jasmine's idea but had become Lucas's regular Saturday activity. "What should we name it?" Jasmine asked, settling beside them on the grass, her movements careful not to disturb the newly planted soil. Lucas considered this with the seriousness of a child who understood the weight of naming something precious, something that would outlive them all. "I think we should call it Sarah's tree," he said finally, "because it's going to grow big and strong and watch over our house just like Mommy watches over us from heaven. And maybe someday, when I'm a grown-up and have kids of my own, I can tell them stories about their grandmother while we sit in its shade." William's throat tightened with emotion, but it was the good kind now, the kind that connected rather than isolated, that honored love instead of hiding from it. "I think that's perfect, son." They worked together in comfortable silence, 3 people who had found their way to each other through shared loss, and the gradual understanding that families could be built in many different ways. The afternoon sun was warm on their backs, and the simple act of planting something that would grow long after they were gone felt like the most hopeful thing William had done in years. The business world had adjusted to William's new priorities with surprising grace. The Morrison partnership had proven more successful than the original acquisition would have been, creating a model of collaborative leadership that other companies were beginning to study. William's reputation had evolved from workaholic perfectionist to one innovative leader who understands work-life integration, and he found himself fielding speaking requests about sustainable leadership practices. But more significantly, his management team had stepped up in ways that proved his micromanagement had been more hindrance than help. Marcus had revealed a talent for strategic thinking that had been suppressed under William's controlling leadership style. The quarterly reports showed record employee satisfaction scores, and their client retention had improved as their team became more responsive and creative. "You know what I realized?" William had told his board during their last meeting. "I spent years thinking I was indispensable when really I was just afraid to trust other people to care about our success as much as I did. Turns out, when you give people the authority to make decisions, they make better ones than if you try to control every variable yourself." Elizabeth Chen had smiled knowingly. "Funny how learning to be a better father can make you a better CEO." As they finished planting the tree and watered it thoroughly, Lucas stood back to admire their work with the satisfaction of someone who had contributed something meaningful to the world. "Dad," he said, leaning against his father's shoulder. "Yeah, buddy. Do you think Mommy knows about our tree?" William looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear in the twilight. The question no longer felt impossible to answer, no longer carried the weight of theological uncertainty that had once paralyzed him with doubt. "I think she knows about everything, Lucas," he said, his voice steady and sure. "The tree, our Saturday morning pancakes the way you laugh when Jasmine tells you stories about her nursing school adventures. I think she knows that we're learning how to be happy again while still keeping her love alive in our hearts." "Are you happy, Dad?" The question was asked with the directness of a child, but William could hear the deeper concern underneath the need to know that his father's healing was real and lasting, not just a temporary reprieve from grief. The question was simple, but the answer encompassed everything they'd learned about love and loss, and the possibility of joy after devastation. Was he happy? Not in the uncomplicated way he'd been before loss taught him that love and pain were often the same thing. But yes, he was happy in a deeper way, a way that acknowledged sorrow without being consumed by it, that honored memory while embracing possibility. "I am son," William said, meaning it completely. For the first time in 2 years, I really am. Not because the sadness is gone. I don't think it ever completely goes away when you love someone as much as I loved your mother. But because I've learned that happiness and sadness can live in the same heart, and that loving you and Jasmine doesn't make me miss Mommy any less. It just makes our family bigger. Lucas nodded, as if this made perfect sense to him, and William marveled at his son's ability to hold multiple truths simultaneously: grief and joy, memory and hope, the past they cherished, and the future they were building together. That night, after Lucas was asleep and Jasmine had gone to her own apartment, though she spent most evenings with them now, the transition to full-time family life was happening gradually, with the kind of care they'd all learned to take with precious things. William stood in his son's doorway, watching the steady rise and fall of small shoulders under a superhero-printed comforter. The room looked different now, alive with the evidence of a child who felt safe to spread out, to make messes, to display his interests and achievements, without fear of being too much trouble. Science fair ribbons hung next to artwork books were scattered on the desk in the way of someone who read for pleasure rather than assignment. And the memory box sat open on the nightstand alongside current treasures. A friendship bracelet from Jeremy, a special rock found during their recent camping trip, a photo from Lucas's first successful bike ride without training wheels. The drawing Lucas had made in the hospital still held a place of honor, Dad, with its misspelled love. But beside it now was a new drawing created just that week, a house with 4 figures standing in front of a large tree, all of them smiling. At the bottom, in Lucas's improving handwriting, "Our family is growing and love grows too." William smiled and closed the door softly, his heart full of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. In the hallway, Sarah's photograph smiled back at him from its place of honor on the wall, surrounded now by pictures that told the story of their continuing life. Lucas's school events, family dinners, lazy Sunday mornings, and the gradual integration of Jasmine into their daily happiness. Looking at Sarah's picture no longer brought the sharp stab of loss that had once made breathing difficult. Instead, it felt like a daily reminder of love's persistence, a blessing on the family they were becoming, a promise that some connections are too deep to be severed by death. His phone turned off for the evening, as had become his habit, would probably have messages from Marcus about Monday's projects or emails from clients in different time zones. Tomorrow, he would be the CEO his company needed, making decisions and leading meetings, and contributing to the success that supported not just his family, but the families of everyone who worked for him. But tonight, he was exactly where he belonged, home with the people who had taught him that love multiplies rather than divides, that healing doesn't mean forgetting, and that the greatest success of all is learning to be present for the ordinary magic of a life fully lived. And as he stood in that hallway, surrounded by evidence of love reborn, William couldn't have known that 6 months later, their story would come full circle in the most beautiful way possible, with a celebration that would honor the past, embrace the present, and plant hope for a future filled with the kind of love that Sarah had always believed was possible. The best stories, after all, are the ones that remind us that endings are really just new beginnings in disguise. 6 months later, the park was filled with the sounds of children playing and parents chatting as the annual community picnic reached its peak. William pushed Lucas on the swing set, both of them laughing as they tried to see how high they could go. "Meyer, Dad, I want to touch the clouds." "Hold on tight, buddy." Nearby, Jasmine spread a blanket under Sarah's favorite kind of tree, an oak now grown tall and strong. She unpacked a lunch that smelled like home and love and second chances. "William," she called, "bring our boy over here. It's time to eat." "Our boy." The phrase hit William like a gentle wave, filling him with gratitude for the unexpected ways life could heal itself. As they ate sandwiches cut into star shapes and shared stories that made Lucas giggle, William marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From that terrible night in the hospital with a crumpled drawing in his hands, to this moment of perfect, imperfect family joy. A child's laughter floated across the park, pure and bright and full of possibility. William looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not just Sarah's eyes or his own features, but a completely unique person who was brave and funny and kind and loved. "Dad," Lucas said, tomato from his sandwich smeared on his cheek. "Are you okay? You look like you're thinking really hard." William reached over and wiped his son's face with a napkin, then pulled him close. "I was just thinking about how much I love you, buddy, and how grateful I am that we found our way back to each other." "We had help," Lucas said, grinning at Jasmine. "The best kind of help." As the sun set over their perfect, imperfect day, William realized that healing wasn't a destination. It was a choice you made every morning when you woke up. A choice to love despite loss, to hope despite heartbreak, to believe that even the most broken things could be made beautiful again. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least expect. Sometimes the path to healing leads through the heart of someone who understands our pain because they've walked the same dark road. And sometimes a simple drawing made with broken crayons can be the key that unlocks a love we thought we'd lost forever. In the end, being a father, being human, isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, staying present, and choosing love over fear every single day. It's about remembering that the hearts we're called to protect are also the hearts we're called to know deeply and truly and without reservation.